Today we're going to talk about the Victoria or Corona style grain mill. This video was almost an afterthought. We were at the hardware store the other day picking up a stainless steel bolt to replace the stainless steel bolt that we've been using to attach to our electric drill. Most grain mills come with a crank arm so you can manually mill the grains. We've removed that and put in a stainless steel bolt that we tighten down, and then once tightened down, cut off the head to the bolt so that we can then put the electric drill directly on the bolt. The downside to this method, as opposed to other options that we've seen for hooking up a grain mill to an electric drill, is over the years, little by little, anytime the drill slips a little bit because it's not tightened down enough, it will wear down the bolt to the point that over several years we've found it necessary to replace that bolt because this part of the bolt was worn down below the thread lines. At that point, that's pretty significant. We don't want the bolt to break off and then be stuck in the grain mill and have to replace the entire grain mill. But if you just keep an eye on it, make sure you tighten down the drill. It shouldn't slip very often and it shouldn't wear down very quickly. The other thing that we wanted to talk about was extending the hopper, which all we did was take a plastic funnel, bungee cord, and attach it to the grain mill. This is a relatively inexpensive way to extend the hopper. We've seen a lot of other modifications online. This is the method that we've used with pretty good success over the years. Another thing we wanted to talk about is the gap setting of the plate that grinds the mill, and with these Corona and Victoria style grain mills, making sure that you tighten these bolts all the way down. We'll do a close-up of what we're talking about here in a moment. What you want to avoid is taking the time and effort to adjusting and setting your gap setting, and then not tightening down these bolts and causing the plate to float around and not be at the specified gap setting that you wanted. The reason people have a tendency to back those bolts off is because when you're milling, it creates a lot of resistance and tension, particularly when you get into the more dense, harder, like rice malts, for example. So people will back off on these bolts because it loosens up the milling plate and makes it easier to mill. But you're not getting the right mill gap setting. Some alternatives are to make sure that these are tightened down all the way, and to start back off the mill gap setting, run the malt through an initial gap setting that's larger, and then doing a second run at the more finer, appropriate gap setting. Another option is to just tighten it down and get a really good grip on whatever mechanism you're using to attach to your drill. Switch over to a hand crank and do it the old-fashioned way, or you do multiple passes. For the purposes of this demonstration, I'm hand turning the crank very slowly. The two screws here are tightened completely down, and you're making the adjustments here. What you want to avoid is loosening up these screws here and making that whole assembly sloppy. Tighten down the screws and make your adjustments here. This screw will lock in the setting that you make. For an example, we're going to tighten it down so it's really snug. And I'm going to turn the crank by my hand, and you can see, maybe not as well on the camera, but I can feel a lot of resistance as those two plates are putting pressure up against each other. At this setting, mill probably could not even pass through this example. But when I open that up, and I'll do it quite a bit just for demonstration purposes, even though it doesn't look like much on the camera, it spins freely. Now, using a hacksaw or a Dremel, remove the head of the steel bolt so that the drill can attach over the top of it. Now install the bolt with the head removed. Attach the drill and tighten down. Now you're ready to start milling. We recommend using a corded drill as opposed to a battery-powered drill. It's been our experience that depending on the strength of the drill or how tough the malt is, you'll have a more consistent time using a corded drill. This setup is very inexpensive. The Corona or Victoria style grain mill, usually you can find them about $30. I don't know what that would be with shipping. They're quite heavy. The bolt, the stainless steel bolt that we purchased and removed the head from, 89 cents from the hardware store, and you have a pretty decent setup for milling gluten-free malts. There are obviously a lot of other options for grain mills. This is just an inexpensive option. It works quite effectively on all the different varieties of gluten-free malts, including the rice malts, which have a very tough seed. But by all means, if you want to use some of the roller style grain mills, there are certainly very good mills out there. We always try to use and demonstrate more intro level equipment to show that it can be done on any budget, and you can get a good result without spending a lot of money, and I think this is a good example of that. So thank you for watching.